Okay, good. At the end of last week's notes, I believe I had the 11 contributions of Buddhism, and I wanted to just take a minute and do that and think about those, because I think it's important that we know how religions function. And so that's going to be my notes. But anything I still forgot? Oh, she brought her orange hair. Oh, I sort of got close. Yellow.
Yes, you did.
I didn't even realize I was doing it.
You didn't.
These habits are really hard. And did you think about it at all today?
I found this bright headband. I think it's got orange and yellow.
Oh, it does, yeah. So you did that purposely?
Yeah, I had that very same headband.
Yeah.
Oh,
What do you sense when you make that decision? What's happening within you?
It's sort of just like a remembrance, or maybe a homage to Buddhism.
Say it again.
A homage, I guess, maybe is that the
Homage?
word?
Okay.
Homage, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just kind of like an acknowledgement or
Sure.
an honoring of Buddhism,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, no, that's neat. I mean, because I think that's is one of the wonderful ways we can appreciate the religious thought that Buddhism has added to the world community. And I think that's important. I think we need to honor all of them. But Buddhism has made an amazing contribution. And I'm stunned. I mean, it's hardly a day when I don't hear a Buddhist concept,
Mm-hmm.
in the general media.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, it was mindfulness. And that, we got so much stress in this election, we need to practice mindfulness. Okay. Raise your hand, anybody that knows where that came from.
Yeah, right.
And so that's being aware of that, I think, is important. And personal awareness that I'm going to honor a tradition, I think is just wonderful. It's a wonderful. Oh, good. I've got Lynette in the picture. That's appreciated.
I'm fine in my spot.
Any time for movies or books or anything else that relates to the course that we can chat about?
We started watching a film on Gaia called Enlightened last night, but I fell asleep halfway through, and I'm really sad, so I'm going to go back and rewatch it. But Colt was really stoked on it this morning.
Okay.
He woke up, did a whole morning routine, and he was like, that movie was so great. They were talking about, mindfulness and, the power of the mind.
Sure.
So I thought that, and it's called Enlightenment, so.
That was the Netflix movie?
Gaia.
It's where?
Gaia. Gaia
Sure.
is like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's like a Netflix for spiritual.
Oh, it's a separate, I see.
Yeah, so GAIA, it's like a streaming channel, and they have amazing movies on there. So good. Yeah, really cool, consciousness, spirituality, all sorts of yoga. It's great. So we don't have Netflix, we have Gaia instead.
Excellent.
Right, so it's a network.
Yeah.
A streaming network.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Okay.
never realized.
I got to get that one.
What'd you say? I didn't realize they had such a thing. But
Yeah.
there's stuff all over the place now.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it.
So spell it again.
GAIA,
Okay.
and then Gaia.
Where's it
Great.
come out of?
Yeah.
India?
What's it cost a month?
I think it's $99 for the year. So
Just $100 a month kind of thing? Is they tend to do an annual?
Yeah, I think they charge us an annual, but they break it down into monthly. I think it's $8.99 a month,
Excellent.
something like that.
Cool.
And I think you can pay monthly too on it. I'm not sure exactly.
Wonderful. No, that's a wonderful resource.
Yeah.
And so it was just on mindfulness last night that you sort of started.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the tagline for the movie was. I can't remember what it was. But
Excellent. Okay, no, that's a great new a new service that I hadn't encountered, and those are always great when you
I
can
think
see
I
them.
think it has like a 7-day free trial also. So you can get a feel for it.
Check it out. You get to be in my book.
Uh-oh.
Don't you have time, just
With or without the mask?
with the man.
Ah, she wants the mask for her book.
Yeah, because that's not what the book is about.
There you go. That'll be, don't mind that. So there's 11 contributions that I really wanted to talk about Buddhism and what it's meant for worldwide religions. Are you with me on your flow sheet?
Yep.
And so just to sort of take probably about 15, 20 minutes to talk about them. The first one was Indian unity. And there was a shattering of the caste system, which stood in the way of achievement of unity. And it also diminished the power of the Brahmins. And so even though Buddhism isn't dominant in India, wherever it does have influence, it's doing this. And so there was some real recognition that Buddhism has had that influence into Indian society. There is very much a sense of destruction of the militant spirit in any area that it goes into. And ahisma is that a concept you've come across, ahisma?
Mm-hmm.
Where have you seen it?
I studied that in my yoga teacher training.
Okay.
That's one of the 8 limbs, or part of the 8 limbs of the yama.
Excellent. And so what's your understanding of it?
Non-violence, non-harm, so non-harming any living being, which can be myself as well, like outward or,
Inward.
maybe
Excellent.
kind of in.
So Buddhism gets credit for that, and there's a fascinating a story of an Indian emperor about 200 years after the Buddha, and gave up war and made it his policy to win people and hearts through love. That would be a challenging foreign policy, especially when someone is beating on your gates. But it certainly was one of the examples of people trying to live that out in a political fashion, not only in a personal or a monastic fashion. And so there is that destruction, which I think is important for Buddhism. Contact with the outside world. Buddhism is a missionary religion, so it's got something people want to talk about. And so it spread. We've already talked about how it really didn't flourish in India, but it flourished everywhere around India. And so it had that wonderful ability to influence people. And then it turned in some of the Indian sites into holy places. So there was that sort of tourism that you get from people wanting to come to venerated places so that they could bring ideas back. And so that helped in the political and commercial way to help folks that were coming back to those centers. So it had a real good. We've talked about the caste system, and so it really had an impact there. One of the intriguing parts about Buddhism is Hinduism is getting very complex. There was an awful lot involved after thousands of years already of Hinduism when the Buddha arrived, let alone 2 more thousands of years. And so Buddhism is recognized for simplifying religion. And the common person can understand Buddhism. It's a wonderful, simple religion. And its concepts are easily accessible by normal people. You don't have to be a spiritual elite to understand the concepts of Buddhism. And so that simplification of religion is a real distinct benefit of Buddhism. And so there are the secrets, the expensiveness, all of those disappeared, let alone having to read the Upanishads in a language you didn't understand. So you first had to read, learn the language, then you could read the book. None of that chaos. It was easily translated into new languages, and the common person could assimilate it. And so that was a great contribution. Its ability to speak in language that people understood on moral attributes and giving to others is such an important part of Buddhism. And so that type of charity is important to Buddhism. Purity, self-sacrifice, truthfulness, controlling over passions. Every time I'm going to talk about passions, I'll think of Colton. Because I'm sure he uses "you need to be passionate" every time he talks to somebody. And so that was such a wonderful, deer in the headlight look he had with us, trying to realize that, okay, this is, what does this mean? And so how do you control the passions? And so I think the productive conversation for you and Colton is control of the passions.
Yeah.
It isn't that the passions are bad, but the passions tend to let you arrive in the wrong place. And so control of passions becomes a really important moral conversation. You've got to know that your passions can take you to sexuality that will harm you, you and your family. It'll take you to consumer issues that will harm you. It will take you to alcoholic beverages that can overwhelm you. The passions can take you to the wrong place. And so it's really recognizing that there's a control of the passions that you have to be about. And that code word for moral excellence, which in American language is, live your passion. You may have to interpret that once in a while so people don't become passionate to the wrong place. And I think that's why it's a good conversation.
Is there a difference between passion and enthusiasm?
I think you're trying to answer it. Go ahead.
Like I'm trying. Well, passion. Sometimes you think about, okay, if you're passionate about somebody that's not good for you, that's not, or you're passionate about, becoming a dancer, or but enthusiasm and energy in a positive way. What's you don't want to just be a zero, but if it does get in the way of your relationships and that sort of thing, we talk about that a lot in our in Christianity, as when your relationships begin to be damaged, then you end up with kind of you're going in the wrong direction, and you call that various different things, some will call it sin and that sort of thing, when your relationships are damaged by your actions or your passion. But enthusiasm for good things, it seems a bit different. I don't know, maybe it isn't different.
The English language is so broad, you can bring 5 to 10 words in trying to describe things, and you can sort of watch the overlap of lots of words. And so use the word that's appropriate in the situation that makes sense. But understand that enthusiasm doesn't have the same downside, usually, that passion does. And so just be sensitive to that. And I think that's where Colton was trying is just to realize that there's something he didn't realize with that word that I think was important to recognize. Please.
Yeah. Well, Colt runs in like the motivational speaking, like guru crowd. Like that's his thing, is like this, like that's what they teach. And that's what they obsess about, is like being passionate. And so,
Right.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, it can be good. Also, I just like that the Buddha teaches the middle path. So
Mhm.
he teaches to not dislike, but not to like either. So it's somewhere in the middle of like, you're not having an aversion and you're not having an attachment to it. And it's like being completely neutral, which is incredibly hard. So
Yes, it is.
yeah.
Well,
it's like-
and I think it's not only hard, you almost damage yourself if you treat the middle path like that. Um, and the way I'd like to encourage us is to recognize that we need passion to take us to the wrong place, because that's the way we learn.
Mhm.
Let me use Aristotle for a minute as a way of how he taught courage. How do you teach courage? And the classic one is, how do you teach courage to a soldier? Well, you put them in basic training and you rile them all up and you get them all excited and you train them and get their muscles and you teach them how to shoot. You do all this sort of stuff, and then you put them in their first battle and you expect them to run towards the battle. Okay? And you realize if they're too aggressive, it's going to get them killed. And so you want them to be passionate towards what they're doing, but then you want them to realize, this is scary. I think it's time to hide and protect myself. And then you realize, because that first time they're going to be passionate in how they're trained. But at some point they realize, wow, I'm overcommitted here. The second time they go into battle, they might be hiding behind the wall most of the time. And they need to realize, wow, I'm not getting much done while I'm behind this wall here. The battle is raging and I'm not acting well. I'm being too cautious now. And the third time, the third battle, you're in the battle more. And the fourth battle, you're not as cautious, but you're cautious. And the fifth battle, so that excellence is negotiating the zeal that comes from moral development. It isn't, I'm trying to find the middle way, because you can't. You have to recognize that people need to be encouraged to be passionate about something, but to know that there's a moment coming when they need to be careful, and get them ready for being careful. And then recognize that their carefulness will get them in as much problems because they won't get anything done, and they need. And so this is how I try and teach nurses. How do you care for people? How do you go into a pandemic and engage in a nurse, with people that are deeply sick? You have to get in the room, okay? You have to be confident you're protected. But then you come out of it with that same, oh my goodness, was I well protected? Am I at risk? And you want to hide, but you can't. And so you go back into it. So you have to live that. You have to live those compliments. You have to live within the moral tension of that. But then it's important to know which way to lean and which way to push into moral situations. And the key to the lean is you lean in to what is helpful to other people. Okay? You don't lean into what is helpful to you, hiding behind the book, hiding behind the rock in a battle. You lean into helping others. The nurse needs to lean into going into a difficult situation. We need to lean into helping others, even though you might not want to engage other people. You might want to be a hermit. So you have to know which way to lean to find excellence as well. So passion is what takes you to a difficult place, but you must know that you can kill yourself in all the places that passion can take you to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the middle ground that Aristotle tried to teach us, it's only when you stand back and look at what your life is that you see this sort of crab walk you've done through your moral life. And you end up being an amazing person that is engaged in helping others. But it isn't, it's only because of the crab walk through the moral life that you can now see that. So the challenge of the middle way isn't saying, I'm going to find the middle path. It's that I'm going to crab walk through life. And the middle path is going to find me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's Aristotle.
Well, the other thing that I'm thinking about is that we have no choice but to be in the middle of chaos this year. Okay, there's chaos everywhere. And so I'm thinking about my grandmother. She was absolutely a stable rock. She never changed. She always was that kind of, she didn't get super highly emotional. She didn't, I'm sure she felt things because she went through a lot. But there was that kind of stability regardless of what was going on around her. It wasn't that she was ignoring their situations, but she sort of kept that middle kind of like a boat in the middle of a storm, with just holding steady in a way where there was just this anchor that was happening. But I don't think it doesn't mean, what is that word that they use right now? MEH. Nah, whatever. That's what I worry about. I think when you get into this, sometimes do people interpret that as being uncaring or whatever, kind of a thing. In the Christian faith, they'll talk about the one thing that God hates is being lukewarm. So that's kind of it's not being too hot, not being too cold. And he would prefer that you're hot or cold. Don't be lukewarm. I'll spit you out of my mouth. And so it's kind of the opposite kind of a.
No, that's Aristotle. Lukewarm means don't be cold, be cold, or be hot.
Yeah, right.
And so that's the challenge of the moral life.
Yeah.
And the real challenge of the middle way is you won't know where the middle is until after you've lived the excesses.
Mm-hmm.
You just won't know where the middle is.
Yeah.
And so let yourself arrive where your passions take you, where your zeal takes you.
Mm-hmm.
And I find zeal to be a wonderful word of encouragement and challenge. That's the zealous way. And so that's the way I want to live. And it isn't just mamby-pamby. It's go after it till you bang the door in your nose. Then you turn around, go the other way until you bang the door in your nose. That's the way I like to live. And so anyway, that's what that middle way I think means, or it's a better meaning.
Yeah.
Than I just and it isn't as clear in Buddhism as it is within Aristotle's thinking as to how you find the middle way. And so that's a good conversation. Thank you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to see Colton in the room of people that are always passionate.
Yeah.
To be cautious. Okay? That might be a wonderful pathway for him to really create a zealous but cautious moral outlook to help people find excellence. It just isn't running until you crash into a door. You know that the crash is coming, and you don't crash into the door. And that's where a lot of hyperbole comes within the guru sect. They overemphasize the zeal.
Well, I think he's kind of noticed that. He is talking about these people who are don't sleep, make money, don't sleep, and he's like, well, you have to sleep for your health, you have to do that. So
Yeah.
I think he is kind of aware of that super extreme side of do this no matter what it takes, because there is a certain point of not overdoing it.
I think wisdom is constructed in the oddest places.
And it does take time. And in my own family, growing up with a motivational speaker.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that was my father. And we'll just someday we'll talk about that. But and trying to accomplish anything with that energy, it can just go every direction and then not amount to much. You
Yeah,
know?
I could see that.
So when you begin to focus down and think, all right, instead of just, let's make sure that you know what direction you're headed before you get the energy going in that direction. What direction are you going? Good Lord.
Okay. So Buddhism, again, I think that's sort of the dominant. It's bouncing off of Hinduism, and it's has the chance to recreate something and be successful. And the Buddha lived long enough that he could make these adjustments on how do we do it better than the Brahmins. And so the Brahmins tended to be typical, elites. They lived the elite life. They constructed everything on an elite basis. And the Buddha wasn't wanting to construct elites. He wanted to construct people that had something that most people could understand. And a lot of new faiths came out of that, whether it's ahisma or bhakti, and they all were better ways of doing Hinduism just because they bounced off of Buddhism. It's interesting, again, in idol worship in a land that's contextually Protestant is a really fascinating conversation. Because all of us are trained to sort of treat idols as a negative, evil, bad influence on our life. And so you don't see many in America. You just don't see a lot of idols. If you go to anywhere else in the world, you'll see that they use idols a lot, and that they're meaningful for them. Idol worship is very much a part of Buddhism, and so this is where and so they're giving it some strange. The historians are giving Buddhism the incredible power that Hinduism has in idols. That they felt that was a contribution of Buddhism. That they set it up and Hinduism grabbed onto it. And so there's some history being developed here as to how idols of the Lord Buddha were seen to be valuable, and Hinduism picked up the idol worship and then really ran with it. So there was a powerful, that we talked about last time, is the value and the role of idols within Buddhism. Well, the Hindus saw this, and it really caught wind within Hinduism. And so earlier than that, they had only developed the various symbols. It was more conversational, and it didn't seem to be as strong. And so the Aryans really practiced the sacrifices, but really didn't venerate idols. Buddhism launched that idea, and then it caught wind within Hinduism. And so that's interesting how we get to rethink what idols are. And I think that's valuable for all of us. Because we haven't got a strong religious idol structure in American life, we have an exceptionally strong commercial idol structure in American life. And so if I put the Coke symbol on the screen, you'd start getting thirsty. It's meant to do that. Well, that's equivalent to idol worship. That when you see a symbol, you see an idol, you do something. And so that's the dilemma, is the commercial symbolism has swamped our boat when it comes to commercialism. And they know the value and the power of their symbols. And they really get to watch it in action on television and now on the internet, on how valuable symbols are at driving people to do something. Well, religions have known that from day one, and their idols have been a power that they have used. Yeah. Protestant America gave it up and de-symbolized their entire culture, and commercial aspects took it over. And that's the sadness of a commercial life, is we don't have religious symbolism that can drive people to doing good and doing good things. a lot of contributions in literature. And so there, the Tripitaka, the Jataka, are important literary works, and they've been translated into incredible numbers of languages. And we've got a lot of scholars working on it. So literature has been benefited by Buddhism. Education, the Sanghas were all education. They were all about education. And so they had to teach. It wasn't just that it had to be taught in the Sangha, and that created an educational environment, and that spread throughout the world. And so that form of education has been a strong part of it. And so there's lots of educational elements within Buddhism. Art for Lynette, lots of art. And the mandala is a wonderful illustration of Buddhist art that's just everywhere now. Everybody has to have a mandala. And what's so intriguing is that people will do artistic representations of mandalas. But when a monk does a mandala, what do they do at the end of it? They destroy it.
Yeah.
And what's that meant to teach them?
Impermanence.
The impermanence. And so,
Buy one in the gallery.
so and that's the intrigue of people. They want their art to be permanent, but the whole point of mandalas was impermanence. So it's sort of fun how people mess with it. And so, and those are the incense holders that you might find in any Buddhist temple. The wonderful shrines that you'll find around Buddhist temples. The buildings themselves are wonderful, and how some of the amazing, huge Buddhist structures that have been built around the world. All are wonderful specimens of how people have tried to express it. Again, if you feel positively towards idols, then the artistic fervor will carry you to some amazing places. If merit can be accumulated by having an idol that you can venerate, you're going to have lots of them. It's just the way it's going. So it's really cool how art was very much a part of Buddhism. Okay, just some more conversations. Okay, I think any other comments on the value and the role of Buddhism that you can think of that might not be covered in that?
No, I did want to ask about Ahimsa. You've heard of the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall B. Rosenberg.
I have heard of it. I have not. Have you had a chance to work through it?
Yeah, it's great. I read it really quickly. It was awesome, and I want to go back and read it again because it's just really great. This paragraph just kind of made me think of that.
Yeah, and their value in literature, and it's new. Again, people have had a Christian context as their backdrop. So when they get a Buddhist context with all of its ideas, mindfulness and nonviolence and all the other classic ideas of Buddhism, it's new and different and wonderful. People will get benefit and value from it. So anyway, if you have a copy of that, I'd love to see it, because I haven't seen it in book form.
Sure,
But I am familiar with the title. Thank you. Okay, do you want to take a break now? This is a good time for break.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe more water. Okay.
Is there more hot water?
Yeah.
Buddhist worship in the good life. The goal, transformation.
Are you going to record?
It's recording. Yeah, I've been recording the whole thing.
Oh. Better skip that part that I just said then.
Uh-oh.
You don't have a recording button on.
I know.
Oh, it's up there, okay.
It's there. It's recorded. So.
Okay, all right.
What do I need to skip?
Oh, cut out my conversation here.
Oh, I don't normally do that, so good luck for me remembering that.
No, in the break.
Yeah, okay. Well, you just got to remember, this is a dangerous place.
Oh, I know.
And so the word that we have, that Buddhism has given to, again, it's another gift of Buddhism, is the word nirvana. And one of the definitions that one of his later monks gave us that I've just spent a lot of time thinking about is nirvana is the cessation of becoming. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it's to focus on the present, not the future. Becoming always, we tend to always be moving towards the future. Nirvana is that recognition of that persistent recognition of being. I am. Not I will be, but I am. Now, if you look at Judaism, you have a sense of what the name God means within Jewish thought? I am. Okay. When you look at Christianity within Christ thought, some of the dominant thought of Jesus come within John's recording, and it's the 7 I ams. What are you? Not what will you be, but what are you? And so that's that incredible sense of self. And so it's that ability to not be so focused on becoming that you forget who you are, and to simply be in that moment of who you are. It has that sense, a bit of self-reflection. The point of meditation is that self-reflection, and that ability to assess what you are right now. And the permanent state of that would be nirvana, the ability to just remain there. And none of us seem to have that capacity of remaining in the present for too long. We're always being dragged out into becoming something. And so there's that incredible sense. And even if you look at the Buddha's life, his moment of enlightenment under the Bodhi tree came and transformed him. But then it led to becoming. And he had to become a teacher and a missionary to make Buddhism come alive. So you go from that stability to the dynamic, to the stability to the dynamic, and nirvana has that sense of permanent stability, and you just rest in that. It's an intriguing concept, picked up in many other religions in unique ways, but it's the ability to simply to be. And the other distinction, when you ask them, well, what's enlightenment? The Buddha said, the I was born, knowledge was born, wisdom was born, science was born, light was born. It is always seeing through knowledge or wisdom and not believing through faith. And so the third eye of Buddhism is also one of those ways that you see differently within Buddhism. You see behind all the becoming that's around you, all the change that's happening around you. You see past that. And then you begin to see yourself in that. And so the ability to see is where the truth can be found, not in that which is becoming. And so nirvana, talked about for 2,000 years, understood by virtually no one. So it is that wonderful, wonderful goal, equivalent to heaven within the religions of the book, the goal that also is meant to reside within the moment. That you should be receiving heaven because of your religious outlooks. Fascinating concepts, and you can spend the rest of your life talking about them. The challenge is, how do you live them? And so within Buddhism, this is not acts of worship or ritual at sacred beings. The worship cannot provide forgiveness. So forgiveness isn't a strong concept within Buddhism. You simply are. You are diminishing your bad karma, and through your deeds and your discipline, you're creating good karma. And that's where you're going to find benefit for yourself and those around you. And you recognizing that you've had a sequence of bad karma, you better create good karma to start overwhelming the bad karma that has been a part of your past. And so that just is why forgiveness isn't a dominant theme within Buddhism. It's meant to say, okay, what are you going to do now to make it better? And so it's an intriguing distinction within Buddhism. Worship is valuable to them. You're commemorating the Buddha. You're remembering what the Buddha said. You're expressive of your own. It's guiding you, and it's refreshing you at the opportunities you do it. And so that becomes valuable and helpful. And so there's lots of rites and rituals within Buddhism, it's always fascinating to go to the rites and rituals of a Chinese celebration are dramatically different than the rites and rituals of a Tibetan celebration, which are dramatically different from a Japanese traditions. And so I was always sending because Portland, we had all varieties of Buddhism. It was always fun to send them to the different locations so they could experience the dramatic differences. And the Japanese is most profound because it's the drums and the celebration with drum impact. And so it was always fascinating to do that. Whereas the Chinese was far more into meditation. And the Tibetan was much more about the guru, about the lama, the personages of Tibetan and the involvement of the personages. Whereas the other two had almost no involvement of the personage. So you're making an offering, you're bringing merit by presenting the offering, and you're giving blessings to the Buddha. You're remembering the Buddha. You're remembering that by giving of yourself, you are training yourself to be selfless and to be thoughtful of others. This is going to be the act of bowing, I would argue, would be a pandemic residue of all of these religions. Bowing became the way to protect yourself in the many pandemics through the ages, and it became a sacred residue of what was classically recognized as, if I touch people, I am creating problems for myself, and all of a sudden people getting sick because they've been too touchy, and they back off and they say, okay, how can I respect you without touching you? And so it's intriguing. The Tibetans will do an awful lot of head bowing, where they'll touch the heads, head to head. Within the Indian, you're just going to have the hand. Within Japanese, the same way. It's the deep bowing that's culturally expressive. But to me, that's pandemic residue. And we don't know what to do. You see this stupidity of people trying to come up with rituals that will allow them to respect each other. And right now, the weird one is the elbow bump, which and I'm really fascinated that bowing hasn't started within the America, because that's our post-pandemic ritual of non-touching. And so bowing is really, really interesting that way. And it is wonderfully respectful. And it causes people to experience the truth of no self. I am finding you, therefore I have no self. And so in my finding of you, I recognize my no self. Prayer, words of worship, meditation, these are always done. Buddhists also use prayer, devotion, commemoration, petition. A widely used Buddhist common prayer runs like this. I beg leave, I beg leave, I beg leave. By act, by word, and by thought, I raise my hands in reverence to the forehead and worship, honor, look at, and humbly pay homage to the three gems, the Buddha, the law, and the order. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, the Lord Buddha. By this act of worship, may I be free from the 4 states of woe in hell as an animal, a ghost, and a demon, the 3 scourges, war, epidemic, and famine, and the 4 deficiencies, tyrannical kings, wrong views about life and after death, physically deformed, dull-witted, and the 5 misfortunes, loss of relatives, wealth, health, proper belief, and morality. And may I quickly attain nirvana, O Lord. Buddhists often recite the 3 refuges and other important formulas, and monks and priests spend much time chanting words of scripture. In words of worship, they share merit with all others, especially wishing love on all beings. May all creatures, all living things, all beings, all persons, all individuals, all males, all females, all Aryans, all non-Aryans, all gods, all mankind, all spirits be free from enmity, from care, and from oppression. May they all live happily. May they all be free from trouble and adversity. May they all enjoy prosperity. May they all help themselves through the law of karma. There's a wonderful future that you're presenting yourself in that prayer. It's just really a fascinating reality of how you see reality, and the things you're fleeing from, and those are intriguing. Thoughts on those prayers of ritual?
Who are they praying to?
They are orienting themselves. They're not, which is the point of the idols. It's to orient themselves to after working through the idol to produce good karma after that. So it's the focus.
Lord in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And they talked about hell in there, which is interesting.
And so they again, we've discovered that if they were to die this instant, they could come back as one of the 4 creatures, hell beings being one of them. If they have done nothing but produce bad karma their whole life, they will not come back as a good person. They'll come back in a terrible state, and the worst state is a hell being. And so that there's that ancient perception that you just don't wash away, that there is an underworld that is a very bad place that you don't want to be. And they get that from the volcanoes and from those realities that the earth erupts with fire, and if they are coming back, that they don't want to be there. So there's just some ancient thinking that's woven into these prayers of how they could come back. And we'll see that again in Jainism as to how they visualize they could be reborn. And so hell beings being the bad ones. Okay, a lot in their daily life, they will have a small shrine in their home. They'll have a small Buddha image there. They'll have a vase for flowers. They'll come to the shrine as their first act of the day and their last act of the day. They'll put fresh flowers in, they'll put food offerings, they'll light a candle, they'll bow toward, they'll offer one of the prayers that we have. And so that would be part of the daily ritual of the average layperson in their home. If you have been called into the monastic life as a monk or a nun, then you've got a much more demanding ritual from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. where you'll be doing multiplicities of that throughout the day. Rituals for the change of life. Buddhists have been much less concerned with birth and growth. The birth and weddings will not focus on rituals. They will deal with initiation, and here you see a young lad beginning to look like a monk by having all of his hair being shorn off. So young boys become a novice monk for a short time. They shave the head, they take vows, they spend the night, they go begging, and they return to normal in a short time. And so it's just part of how youngsters are oriented so that they understand what it feels like to be a monk. And so again, a family that places one of their children in a monastery receives extraordinarily good merit. And so families will often designate one of their children to be a monk or a nun and help the family in that way. And so that happens in many, many levels. The yellow robe that we've been talking about is part of the ordination, is to receive the 4 ways for the 4 reliances. You'll be. And so if you want to create a monastery, you have to have an assembly of at least 10 monks. Your head is shaved, you're dressed in the yellow robe. You petition for admission, your question on whether you have any diseases, whether you had a free birth, whether you're debtless, whether you're exempt from military service. You have to be 20 years old, and your parents have to agree to it. If the monks are silent when you ask, then you're admitted. And if there's a rumbling, then you're not. And so it's an interesting monastic ritual in some of the ones that I've researched. You then have your 4 reliances. You're reliant for others for food as alms, and you'll do your walks through the communities to find that. You'll be wearing old rags for clothes, the shade of the tree for shelter, and cow's urine for medicine. Those are the 4 reliances. Now, I haven't really ever figured out what cow's urine is good for, so I'm sort of intrigued with that one as to what in the world is the value of cow's urine. So I have no idea what that would do for them, nor have I ever read anything of how it's been evaluated. But that's one of the 4 reliances of the monastic life. Death should always be in mind. Death should always be in mind. A person's rebirth is determined by the state of mind just before death. And so there's a ritual at the bedside, and there's rites after 7 days following death and annually. And so death, which is natural in that sense, your rebirth will be instantly after your death. Therefore, you want to be in really good shape if at all possible, as you die, so that you'll have a good rebirth. That just sort of makes sense. Comments?
So some of I think about the LDS send everybody out for 2 years, for, I don't know if they're doing much of that right now. But I was just remembering some of my guys from Thailand. We had a Thai restaurant right next to my gallery in Bethany. And I think they spent 2 years as monks in Thailand, and then that was just part of their requirement.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And then they would go back to their normal stuff, you know.
Okay.
So, yeah,
It's a real strength of the LDS community is expecting their young people to serve for 2 years. It's an incredibly strong aspect of how do you make a community stronger? Well, you do that. So any community that has that kind of engagement of its young people will strengthen their community in the long run. So it makes
depending
sense.
what they believe, you know.
My tradition didn't have that, and I think I had a short period. I had about a 3-month service in Africa, which was transformative. I wish it would have been 2 years. It was absolutely
I
fabulous.
love that.
But you can see the value of it when you do it. A little more art. Now, they wear no ornamentation. Realize that when you see pictures of monks or nuns, they have nothing but their yellow robe. And so they have no other symbolic elements on their personage. And they don't go to the movies. They don't attend musical productions if they're the more conservative monasteries. So it's an interesting sense that their art has to come out somewhere else. It's not going to come out from their body or their visage. And so you see it an awful lot in the narrative arts, especially poetry, seems to be quite strong within many in the monastic life. Here's the Song of the Nuns. I am thin. I am sick and weak. But leaning on my stick, I go climbing the mountain. I lay aside my robe, turn my bowl upside down, lean against a rock, and smash the mass of darkness. What does that tell you about the monastic life? The Song of the Nuns.
Pretty desolate.
Really is. But where does the desolation end? It's meant to be desolate, but what's the ending? And smash the mass of darkness. So the ending is light, is hope, is, and so you just sort of are fascinated how that poem carries you to this interesting reversal of everything we venerate as healthy and well, and none of the things that she's recognizing, thinness, sickness, weakness.
Is she at the end of her life? Is that what we're looking at, her death?
Oh,
I'm climbing up this mountain, and I'm going to work at it, and then I'm just going to turn my bowl over because I don't need it anymore.
maybe.
And then I'm going to...
Or that's
as
just
I turn
how
my
she is
bowl
at that
over,
moment. I don't know. It could be an end of life conversation.
And yeah, you know, some of the things.
Some of the other ones from nuns. I was drunk with my beauty, with my form and with my fame. I was still with youth. I despised other women. I adorned this body for the delight of fools. I stood at the whorehouse door like a hunter laying a snare. Today I went to beg for alms. Shaven and dressed in robes, I sat at the foot of a tree and attained to non-thinking. All bonds are loosed, human and heavenly. I have destroyed all drunkenness. I have become cool, quenched. Life before, life after. Release from what was horrible human bondage. Life in a whorehouse. You just are very thankful for what Buddhism brought into the life of that woman. I can't imagine she would have had any other chance to escape the horror that can come in communities where women have no path forward. And so this woman's clearly discovered something. So poetry, important. And so the sculpture, as we are discovering, is a moral message, is a moral message delivering system. And so a few of the things, the marks of the Buddha, you can tell it's the Buddha. And so the elongated earlobes means this is a Buddha structure. The wrinkles on the neck, Buddha. Gold-colored skin, Buddha. And so it's interesting how again, this is to communicate to you, this is an important Buddha structure. You now know it's a Buddha structure. Now you look at the hand gestures to get your moral messages. You look at the posture, but it's particularly the hand gestures. If your palms are out, that means you're granted absence of fear. Can you imagine how many fearful people come into a Buddhist temple? And by seeing that, there's just a washing away of the fear in their life. Thumb touching index finger. I think that might be index finger. Yeah, there's the index finger. And that means teaching the Dharma. And so learn from the Buddha. When you see that, learn from the Buddha and what the Buddha's teachings have given you. Concentration, and your hands are in the lap. And so develop your concentration. There's incredible numbers of hand gestures within Buddhism. And so I don't know if I used to have, my students would always bring me, and I think it's one of the, I wasn't sure if I have that. But what all the hand gestures mean. And it's quite fascinating to realize the dozens of things that you would see from the various hand gestures from Buddhist idols that are teaching people the moral elements of Buddhism. The beauty of Buddhism, why was it successful? Because women were included. Whereas the caste system tended to exclude them and put them lower than the men, there was no difference on the path. And so women could be enlightened. Women could attain nirvana. And so the dilemma was there is the reality of the human species, and so nuns are subordinate to men. So you can attain the goal of the religious life. You can't attain the practical goal of hierarchy in the structures. It's just the reality of human life that has been done. So the most senior nun is inferior to the least monk within the most traditional settings. So that's the challenge of humanity, is men have physical power, which they've translated into social power, and they have created the hierarchies and are able to keep it in place because of their physical power. And so that's the challenge of human life. So there's minimal opportunities for women as far as leadership, except in the nunneries of Buddhism. As far as Buddhahood within Theravada, there is examples of male and female, but a woman cannot be a bodhisattva within Theravada. There's one tale that the Buddha was a princess in a previous life, and that would have informed, but it also speaks to the princess had to die for her to attain enlightenment. So be a good princess, because the next life you might come back as a man, and as a man, you can achieve enlightenment. So you sort of get their drift. They have lots of lives to work with, therefore, may the next one be better. Okay. And so Mahayana, again, Theravada is your most conservative, and this is pretty typical within your conservative cultures. Mahayana is the more liberal. Women can be enlightened, only not in female form. And so you just sort of go, okay, well, what does that mean? Come on back in the next life, or something. And so it's just a challenge. Okay, so challenge for women. And so the advantage within the American context is that the women will demand leadership opportunities, maximized hierarchical placement, and the ability to achieve all things within the Buddhist way of thinking. Beauty of American culture is they bust through all this. And so you're really talking about women in leadership in Asian countries, as opposed to women in leadership in America. And women have led the way within Buddhism in so many ways. And so laity, they just don't typically have time to focus on nirvana. We've discovered that nirvana is being. Nirvana is deeply oriented to meditation and long-term meditation. And so what layperson is going to have the chance to do that? It's going to take a monk in a monastery that's going to have the capacity to do extended internal reflection. And so the layperson, therefore, just doesn't get themselves too worked up about nirvana. They'll have moments of enlightenment, but not a permanent nirvana within their lives. So they're pursuing their karmic goal of good life and better rebirths. And so they support and maintain the Sangha. They have good businesses. They're building good families. They're providing for the religious structures around them. They're dedicating a child to the monk, because if that happens, good things for everybody. So the lay people just don't get their shorts in a knot over nirvana. They let the monks and the nuns strive for that. In other religions, clergy serve the people. In Buddhism, people serve the clergy. Here you have the walk, as monks will come through a village, and everybody's ready for them. They've got food, they've got flowers, they've got gifts, and your Buddhists are being served by the people. It's an interesting reversal within Buddhism, that the people are oriented to do this. It's really good karma to be nice to a monk, which makes sense. And so everybody does it. And that's part of the inversion of Buddhism when it comes to how the spiritual elites operate in that capacity. Comments?
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting how this idea of rebirth gives a sense of purity almost to the people, and that it's not as much of an ego thing where they're like, I have to reach nirvana, like me. It's more like, okay, we can all contribute to the greater good because eventually we'll get our turn.
Yeah.
We just have to wait. Or this idea of dharma, it provides a sense of like groundedness or okayness with not being in the top class, because there has to be someone to make the fires and take care of the human waste. And it's like, in order for this like higher level of thinking and philosophy to be able to open up, it's almost as if there has to be a serving class, and those people have to be okay doing that work.
That's right.
Or it's not going to work.
That's right. So they can't have, they have to have rebirths. They have to have multiple rebirths to give them hope for the future, because things aren't going to change. Their societies are so structured and so rigid, you just can't assume that something's going to happen that'll allow you to get a better life than what you've got. And that's the real advantage of the American lifestyle. You can dream about you building a new company and making that company fly and making $1 billion. Those are all stories that we tell. And so that gives you that. And why do we think like that? Because we've only got one life to live. So you go crazy in this life because you've got one shot at it. And so there's a real sense of grounding, or an American could say complacency, in these societies where they just feel like they're just going to live out where they're at. But if you were to talk to the vast majority of Americans, they don't think life is going to be any different than what it's been given. You know, if they were born in a trailer, they're going to die in a trailer. If they were born in a mansion, they're going to die in a mansion. They're going to be where they're at typically. And we don't have war and famine and pestilence that'll cause a destruction of the existing structure. We just haven't experienced that. But if you've lived in a country with war and famine and pestilence and pandemics, you begin to realize how the social structure devolves and gets destroyed, and people get carried down to a horrific place in those kinds of settings. And so you want to have another life because this one sucks. And so that kind of thinking is quite natural with most human society for most of time. The American tradition has given it has had the privilege of not thinking that way, of always assuming that they could rise through one life and do anything possible that a human being can accomplish. And but very few take advantage of it in reality.
Yeah.
Most are born in a trailer and die in a trailer, born in a mansion and die in a mansion. They don't do a lot of that kind of jumping.
Mindset.
There is very much
It's a mindset, and it's not understanding the amount of work that it takes. And I think, you know, in just chatting with my mom, who has jumped from being extremely poor, she doesn't understand why minimum wage. She's talking about, well, minimum wages for people who are just learning how to work. And it isn't where they end up. And I have to say, no, people are ending up here. And there is no step beyond it. And so much as we could survive on that income of one person before in the 1950s, it is no longer possible, and there is nothing beyond for many, many people than that minimum wage job of $15 at the most.
$7.50, I think, is the federal minimum wage in Idaho.
So she's still thinking 16-year-olds. Oh, this is only the beginning job for people to learn how to work. It's the end of many because they cannot.
They don't have the skills or the capacity or the desire to do more.
Or the understanding of what
the beauty of the American system is it's given you the tools, primarily of education, to jump where you're at. As you talk about first-generation college students, those are students that get the privilege of jumping out of wherever their family was to something new and different, even to professional life, even to whatever echelons of society you want to achieve.
Someone has to give you the idea.
Somebody has,
Somebody
and
has,
then and the tools to get it
Right.
in one life.
And
But in reality, and even when I look at my grandfather's life, where he was paid with chickens, to my dad's life, to my life, because of the sacrifice of my grandfather and great-grandfather, their sons had a better life. And because of their sacrifice, I've had a better life than that.
Yeah.
So is that not a very similar reality that
Yeah.
that it took multiple lives
Yeah.
for me to get where I'm at?
Sure.
Okay? Which is pretty close to what Hinduism and Buddhism is trying to say on the rebirths.
Yeah.
That it's
You're
taken
generational.
multiple lives
Yeah.
to attain something better.
Sure.
You can't do it typically in one life. You just can't. It's just really hard.
I think the most bizarre thing is that having, my mom finally making it, and her, she still has the demeanor of somebody who hasn't made it, okay? But her sisters and brothers just think it's just bizarre, and they can't relate to it at all. Why do you try so hard? What is the point of it? And so it's really hard for them to even understand who she is and why she's so determined, It's not part of their culture. They don't understand it. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
Okay, so Buddhist ethics focuses on the circle of karma. The circle of karma. And so if you do good things, you get merit, and you get a pleasant social reaction around you. If you do bad things, you create demerits, and life around you is unpleasant. And then you produce more karma. And so karma creates the karmic circle that you want to do that. Well, what kind of things do you do to create good karma? And the term that we use in all our religious structures typically is that of love. And so if you have boundless love, you get boundless merit, and you get boundless good stuff around you. And so the goal of Buddhism are the four sublime states. And you want to meditate on the relationship you have with others. You want to cultivate love that's unconditioned and unlimited. And so that incredibly ethereal goal is important. Did you have, I had this chat with Ian, I didn't have it with you. Did you work your golf clicker when it comes to boundless love?
Yeah.
Did you work it? Okay, now let's have a little report from you. And so how high a number could you get before you reset to zero? Now, you were in an incredible family environment when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
So what did you discover? How many clicks to your golf clicker of boundless love could you occasion before you hit zero?
Probably got to like 5 or 6.
5 or 6?
I had to reset.
Excellent. Okay.
Pretty good. With my family.
Now,
In a long time.
with your family that you haven't seen a long time, and you made it to 6.
Yeah.
You can celebrate. What do you think is the average number that people can get to before they fail and fall to zero again? And I think you now understand that 6, that might be a high water mark
Well,
here.
I think that was definitely the most. Probably like 2 to 3.
2 to 3 is the average of this exercise
Yeah.
that students report that they can get to, even when they're thinking about it, conscious and trying to do it. They typically get to 2 to 3. If they're having an amazing run at it, they can get 6, 7, 8, 9. But then something causes them to be frustrated, and they drop it back to 0. Now, the next most important question is, who causes you to go back to 0 most frequently?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the universal answer to that is the person who's closest to you causes you to go 0 most of the time. Now, that's wonderfully revealing, because the person closest to you often is the person you assume you love the most.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of self-awareness happening here. That in all human nature, our closest people cause us to exhibit the least love most often. Now, they make up for it on lots of occasions. You know, they crawl out of the doghouse, you crawl out of their doghouse, and life goes on for a few more, and then all of a sudden you're back to zero. But it's universal that it's the ones that's closest to you cause you to revert and express non-love. Okay? So, and the learning point of that is not to be afraid of that. To simply know that that's the reality of it. That they're going to cause you to not love. And the minute you understand that, then you can come out of that state faster. Okay, so you can return. So while the goal is unconditional and unlimited, you have to recognize the reality of human dynamics. And the ones you're around least are the ones you can exhibit love the most and feel it the most. The ones you're closest to are the ones that you get frustrated with and you get mad at, and pop, you're back to zero again. Does that make sense? Yeah. But is there a little reality that sort of sets in with that awareness?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's great awareness.
It is a wonderful part of what love is. And I think psychologists tend to leave the idea of love too far behind as they work through many things. But I think we need to understand what love is. And our religions focus on it. That's part of their key toolbox, is that word love. So it's important to be realistic when we recognize what love is and how love works. Another definition that I really enjoy, the definition of love is the attraction. Let me see if I can come on. It's the attraction when you're distant. That's the definition. Is when you're not close to the person you love, you feel incredible attraction to want to get together again. That distance is also an interesting definition of love. The one you want to be with is really a high definition of what love is, and yet you have to know that they stress your expression of love the most, that same person. So you're going to live in that dynamic tension.
I think the most amazing example of that has been what we have seen with your parents in the last month.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I had absolutely no idea how much they loved each other. Because they just get on each other's nerves, right? They've been married for 65 years or something like that. And all of a sudden, they had to be separated. They had an accident, and one of them ended up in one hospital, and the other one ended up somewhere else. And then they've been trying to get together, and it was that incredible, just trying to get back together, and the sadness in your dad's voice of it's awfully quiet, And she loved to talk. She just taught me, but talk too much and then drive him completely nuts. And now it's like it's awfully quiet. And I'm so excited that Mommy's coming home tomorrow, and so she's moving back to the building today, and they're able to see each other every day. They can't live in the same room. But that excitement in his voice, knowing that she was going to be back, even though you get to mention all kinds of crazy things going on, that where have you been? I'm not the same when I'm not with you. I need to be with you. Unbelievable. Just amazing thing to watch. Yeah.
And so boundless love, religions just live in that word. And part of the beauty of religion is you'll be expected to live that word. Whatever it means, you're expected to live it. And that's the beauty of religion. You tend not to see that within the philosophical literature. You tend not to see the word love at all in Plato. It just, where is it? So you don't see it much in philosophy. But within the religion, that's an expectation. And so studying religion has that benefit of working on the word love. Boundless compassion, intense fellow feeling for all living beings in pain. When one suffers, we all suffer. If we had that more in American society, our society would be profoundly different. If someone around you is suffering, you are suffering. We don't have that. Buddhism expects that. For you to have that sense of compassion when you engage in suffering. And so that's an incredibly important. And it's part of karma. And when you see people, you create good karma by living how the other person is living and being in pain when they're in pain. I really like this one. Sympathetic joy. Seek out prosperity for others and happiness of others and rejoice with them. We, in American society, become very competitive very quickly. And if we see someone being prosperous, we tend to jealousy. Buddhism is saying sympathetic joy. Have joy in their successes. Celebrate with them. Wonderful concept that we need to reflect on often, to be sympathetically joyful for each other, and to recognize that their happiness, you can be happy too, instead of jealous of them. Limitless equanimity. Treat all others equally with love, compassion, and joy. No aversion, no need for approval. Okay? You just celebrate with them. You give them love, you give them compassion, you give it joy, you give it to all people, and you don't enrich yourself from other people. You're a missionary. You're going into their midst and participating with them and partnering in life with them. You don't need their approval, but you do need to recognize that that opportunity of giving that to others means you're getting it from them. And that is also part of a Buddhist life. Comments on the sublime states which constructs the Buddhist ethic?
I feel like if you look at the philosophy, how you're saying they don't use the word love at all. It makes people really uncomfortable when you start talking about love sometimes. They're like, I would love, like, I don't even know. It's just weird how people get hung up on that word, and it's like mushy-gushy. They're like, I don't want to be too mushy-gushy here, or it's very uncomfortable.
Part of the uncomfortableness is the failure of the English language. Most languages, the example of being snow, within the Eskimo tradition, there's 6 different words that they use to replace our word snow, because snow is really different, a lot. We have the same problem within the word love. We really invest far too much into that word. Whereas within Greek tradition, you have 4 different, 4 classic understandings of the word love. And you have brotherly love, you have erotic love, you have a divine agapeist, which is a divine, sublime sort of love. You have a friendship kind of love. So you have these you have a more diverse language set. We pack a boatload into the word love. And we call that which we do with our dog love, and that's the same, and we use that to define our love or lack of love to other human beings. I just love my dog. I hate you. And just sort of like, wow, why is that together? The dog is designed to be your friend. He's genetically pre-programmed to be your friend. And you think that him or her wanting a treat is loving you. And so we really have some very odd precepts and thinking. And comes to love. And that's partially because the English language is not sophisticated in this, in whatever this is. We're investing way too much into the word. And so that gives us all sorts of trouble. When you see the love of two teenagers going at it, we call that love, and the love of my parents, and that's still the same word. What is this? That's a totally different
One
response.
is sacrifice, and the other is passion. Okay, yeah, there's something going on.
And so that's the challenge of the word. And so just know that that's a defect in the English language that we haven't solved. We try and give it adjectives to try and make it helpful, but dear me, we need a better language. So you'll often see when people talk about it, they'll drop into another language. A lot of times, if they know Greek, they'll flop into Greek and talk about all the Greek forms of love. So there's a sadness from it, which means that when we relate to each other, we'll use the same word in these settings that are completely different, and that's a tragedy for us. So the Buddhist 5 precepts: refrain from taking life, nonviolence. I just about got ill when I pulled in behind a truck, and there was an elk and this huge rack. And then they're coming out the back of this truck that was now, and then you realize that they had severed the limbs, and limbs were sticking out the side of the truck. And I really struggled. I really struggled with that. And I hope they struggled with it too, but I have a sense they didn't. They did it gleefully. They chopped this sucker up, they threw it in the back of the truck, and they're going home to fill up their freezer. I would wish, if they did that they had this horrible, this Native American reverence of what they've done to an animal that didn't deserve that action. And karma has a better way of dealing with this. And again, when Colton was talking about going hunting, I just kept quiet. It was very important, and it's going to be used for food, and but I'm not a hunter. And partially because I was never trained to be a hunter. My parents weren't hunters. Nobody trained me to be a hunter, so I don't think of hunting. So it's easy for me to critique it because I'm not that. And I understand that. But I still, when I come to this and I say, taking of life, nonviolence, I think hard about it. And it's why vegetarianism is classic within Buddhism, Hinduism, your Indian religions, your Asian religions. There's this appreciation of what violence accomplishes anywhere in your life. And so, but the Buddhist taking of life is to be refrained from, any life. And that's a very thoughtful thought. Taking what is not given, and that's stealing, wrong sexual relations, you have to control your passions. You should not lie. And drugs and liquor will cloud your mind. And Buddhism is all about the mind. So why would you go there? And so those precepts are very, very much a part of the Buddhist life. Comments on the 5 precepts?
I would like to share this kind of weird place I've been with the nonviolence and vegetarianism. For years, I wanted to be a vegetarian. I mean, I don't kill things. I don't fish. I don't kill fish. I don't kill spiders to keep them outside. Like, I really make a good effort to not kill. With the vegetarianism, I've been trying to become a vegetarian for many years now. And this spring, I had a doctor's appointment, realized that I have to go on this really special diet to resolve this issue that I'm having. And the diet is to eat meat and vegetables and eggs and no carbs, no sugar. And so I pretty much had to say, okay, I have to eat meat. Like, I've been trying to become a vegetarian, but I cannot do it right now. Because if I don't eat meat right now, it'll hurt my body. It's hard for myself.
Same buck, man.
Isn't that hard?
It's really hard.
But isn't that the best way
Yeah.
to appreciate meat?
I
Okay?
think so. Yeah.
Why human beings have eaten meat their whole lives.
Yeah.
It is an easier pathway to healthy eating.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly vegetarians and vegans can accomplish the goal, but it's much, much harder. And you really have, and now you're sort of discovering a downside to the vegetarian lifestyle. And so that's the challenge. And to me, that's again why I come back to us to an appreciation of the Native American, is that reverence of taking life.
Respect.
And so when you give reverence to it, I think there's such a better emotional appreciation of life around you. It's not insignificant. You have a deep appreciation now of what meat is and its value. And if you need it, and you need it to live, then you will appreciate it, venerate it, be thankful for it, and that's the right way to do it. That is life on your table that is being given to you.
I accidentally left out probably 2.5 pounds of hamburger overnight the other day. And I just felt absolutely horrible, not because it was $13 worth of hamburger, but I just thought, an animal gave their life for this, not just that. But I felt, it bothered me for 2 or 3 days. I just thought, this is not only was it a terrible waste, but it's like, oh my gosh, this was an animal that sacrificed its life for my food, and I screwed up. I just faced it and went, oh my gosh, I thought I put that away. And it was a guilt trip for a bit. I just thought, goodness, this is bad, be full of stuff like that.
Isn't that a great place to be? Okay?
Yeah.
It's a great place to be. Any other comments on the 5 precepts of Buddhist life? And so just a last final slide is just a comparison between the monks and the laities. And so for a monk, the spiritual elites in Buddhism, they have no means of support. They're a mendicant. They may accept what is off. They are expected to go and ask others for their food. And they're recommended to be vegetarian and to accept whatever is offered. And out of clothing, the cloth must be given to them. Okay? So the robe they're wearing has been given to them. They don't own it, in essence. They own it because they're wearing it, but not because they have accomplished getting it. Their shelter should not be luxurious. Medicine, take what is offered. No TV, videos, no money. The laity is to offer the monk support appropriately. When the birth of their children, to bless the child, name the child, and educate the child. Marriage is a secular affair. It's not a big Buddhist thing. Death, the body ends, but the mind continues. Strive for a comfortable frame of mind at the end of life. And as far as you're living, honor and respect your parents, your teachers, your spouses, your friends, your employers, and religious persons. And so you get a sense that there's 2 strata that you can live within Buddhism. Do you want to go aggressive as a spiritual elite, or you just want to be a regular, ordinary, common person? Both have distinguished pathways, but because of rebirth, they can have different goals when it comes to that. And so we have that chance. We're going to come back to health and healing in a couple weeks of Buddhism. I inserted a week of Hinduism. I was thinking about health and healing. I wanted to get karma really established so that when we come to a Hindu understanding of health, we really have a very firm understanding of karma. And so next week is Hindu understandings of health and healing, death and dying. And the week following, we'll come back to Buddhism and rethink it again. So we're going to rethink the structures. We're going to be repetitious, but we're also going to think, how do you get a frame of mind of health and healing that both of these religions bring to the table. And so that's what we'll be working on for the next 2 weeks. And really to help our chaplaincy understanding, if we were to encounter a Buddhist, how do we think to be helpful to them? If we encounter a Hindu, how do we think to be helpful to them? So the point of those 2 lectures is really to enter into the framework of a chaplain. How do I help others when I'm in a healthcare setting? And so that's going to be the point of the next 2 weeks. Then we're going to come back to Jainism. And Jainism is our 3rd religion. And it's a wonderful religion to study. It's the religion of Gandhi. And so how did Gandhi become Gandhi? Well, because he was raised in a Jain village. Well, wow, how do what does that do to a person? Well, you become like Gandhi. So it's really a cool religion to study with that as the recognition of what it constructs. So we've got some neat things in front of us. And so keep working on your health and healing. And that's why I'd love to have your presentation next week on what you're discovering. And let me know if that's not possible, because I won't fill up the whole time with a lecture. Okay.
Okay.
So
I plan on having that.
Yeah. You'll have the first step. Ian, if you're watching this, you're hopefully will be able to make a presentation next week as well. And we look forward to that as to your project as well. Any final comments, thoughts, things to think about for the good of the order? Buddhism is wonderful to study. I trust you've enjoyed our time in Buddhism. It is so important. Anything else?
I don't think of anything.
Okay. Well, when you think of the sort of Americanized concepts, what is mindfulness as it comes out of Buddhism? That's a productive conversation. What is no self? That's a very productive conversation. Continuing our conversation on nirvana. Now, these are all wonderful concepts that now can grow out of this initial grounding within Buddhism, and those now come out of the ground that we have now set. As in the next phase, we would talk about those kinds of concepts more carefully. That would be intermediate Buddhism. Please.
On the life of women, I think it's interesting, I guess maybe when you bring it into the American context where we're like, okay, we've got one shot. So that's why American women are so pushy or direct in that way, is because it's, it's disheartening to be like, oh, women can't reach nirvana or they can't be enlightened in more traditional sense. It's like, oh, that sucks. But that's with the idea that there's not going to be a rebirth ever.
Right. And you're stuck in that.
Right.
You're just getting much done.
And I can't imagine, that there'll be enough Buddhist thought in the American culture to change that for the next few generations. It would be a very different world if we thought that way.
And the other thing that's really been bugging me since the beginning of the with the whole election process is that it's also it's twisted Christianity as well, and so you want to get somewhere where it's this rational sense of how do we bring it back to love and respect for one another, and we're in so many of these religions, that's the basis. The basis is respect and love for one another, and we've just absolutely totally twisted it to where it's all about looking, and the idea of looking inward is just to see how much I can get rather than how much I can give, and so it's really driving me a little bit nuts, and I think this is where we're going to have to change things and say, even with mask wearing and everything else,